Hello there, thank you for stopping by the channel. Today's story explores the hidden corners of the human psyche, gentle yet profound. Stay tuned, and don't forget to support the channel so you won't miss the next stories. I never thought a work trip could destroy everything I'd built. My name is Sophia and I'm 34 years old. Looking back, I realized how fragile my perfect little world was, how one stupid decision could shatter years of marriage, trust, and carefully constructed appearances. Henry and I had been married for 11 years. From the outside, we looked like the ideal suburban couple, 2 kids, a beautiful-to-the-style home in a quiet neighborhood, him with his corporate job, and me managing our house. What people didn't see were the cracks beneath the surface. I've always been impulsive, not in a dramatic way, but in those small moments where I'd make decisions without really thinking them through. A spontaneous online shopping spree, booking a last-minute girls' weekend. Or, in this case, a work conference that was anything but professional. Our kids, Matthew who's 8 and Hannah who's 5, had no idea how much was about to change. They were my world, but somehow, I'd managed to forget that in one moment of weakness, or what I told myself was just excitement. The conference was in Chicago, at least, that's what I told Henry. I'd been feeling suffocated. Bored with the routine of suburban motherhood and wifehood. I wanted something, anything, that felt like the old me, the me before kids. Before constant laundry and packed lunches and PTA meetings. What started as a flirtatious conversation with a guy I met at the hotel bar quickly became something more. I knew, it was wrong. I knew exactly how wrong it was. But in that moment, I didn't care. The weeks after Henry discovered my affair were a blur of tension, silent treatments, and hushed conversations when the kids weren't around. He was methodical about everything, gathering financial documents, consulting with a divorce lawyer, planning his next moves. I didn't realize how vulnerable I was. Being a stay-at-home mom meant I had no real income of my own. Every dollar came from Henry, every credit card, every utility bill, every grocery purchase, all under his name. I'd been so focused on maintaining our picture-perfect life that I never considered what would happen if that life fell apart. Thomas was long gone by then. Those passionate moments in Chicago felt like a distant dream. He wasn't interested in a messy divorce, 2 kids, and a complicated situation. Men like him are great at excitement, terrible at consequences. Henry had always been a good provider, a solid, dependable investment banker who worked long hours but made sure we never wanted for anything. But dependable wasn't exciting, solid didn't make my heart race. Thomas, the guy from the hotel bar, was different. He was 39, a freelance photographer with that effortless charm that made me feel alive again. When he looked at me, I wasn't just Henry's wife or the mom who always remembers snack duty. I was Sophia, desirable, interesting. Our first night together, I told myself it was just drinks, harmless conversation, but we both knew where it was heading. The electricity between us was undeniable. I made a choice that night, a choice I knew would change everything. I didn't plan on Henry finding out. Whoever does, I was careful, or so I thought. I used burner apps, created fake email accounts, made sure our text messages were always deleted. But something about my behavior must have triggered his suspicion. The night everything fell apart, I was folding laundry when Henry walked in. His face was different, calm, but with this cold intensity I'd never seen before. "We need to talk," he said. Those 4 words are never good in a marriage. He had tracked my phone's location. He knew about the hotel, he knew about Thomas. Somehow, he had screenshots, messages, proof of everything. The carefully constructed lie I'd been living came crashing down in seconds. "How long?" he asked. His voice was eerily quiet. I couldn't even look at him. The kids were watching cartoons in the next room, oblivious to the nuclear bomb about to detonate in our living room. Henry started sleeping in the guest room. The kids noticed something was wrong, but we kept up appearances. Family dinners were silent affairs, with Matthew and Hannah chattering away, completely unaware of the earthquake about to hit our family. One morning, I found a stack of papers on the kitchen counter. divorce documents. Neatly organized, precise, just like Henry, he'd already spoken with a lawyer, already planned how custody would work, how assets would be divided. I realized then how completely I'd miscalculated everything. My impulsive affair, my belief that I could have something exciting without consequences. It was all unraveling. The most terrifying part, I was completely financially dependent on a man whose trust I had just destroyed. My mother always warned me about taking things for granted. Never put all your eggs in one basket, she'd say. But I'd rolled my eyes, convinced I had everything under control. Now, those words echoed in my head like a cruel reminder. Henry was calculating. He'd already spoken with our financial advisor, frozen joint accounts, and was systematically protecting his assets. I discovered quite painfully that I had no individual credit history. Years of being a stay-at-home mom meant I was financially invisible. The kids started noticing my tension. Hannah would draw these heartbreaking family pictures where Henry and I were separated by wide spaces. Matthew became quieter, more withdrawn. I knew I was destroying more than just my marriage. I was shattering our entire family's foundation. Thomas was nothing more than a distant memory now. Those stolen moments in Chicago seemed like a ridiculous fantasy. He didn't want complicated. He didn't want a woman with 2 kids and a marriage falling apart. Men like him are experts at creating excitement, but terrible at handling real-life consequences. Henry served me papers at breakfast, right in front of the kids. His calm was more terrifying than any anger could have been. Cold, calculated. He'd already consulted with the best divorce lawyer in the county, and I was about to find out just how completely I'd miscalculated everything. "I want full custody," he said quietly while the kids were in the other room. "Your indiscretion changes everything." That word, our indiscretion, made my affair sound like nothing more than a minor social mistake. But we both knew it was so much more than that. The first meeting with Henry's lawyer was a wake-up call I wasn't prepared for. I sat there, feeling small and exposed, as they discussed my entire life like I was some kind of liability. My financial ignorance became painfully clear. I had no idea about our investments, our real estate holdings, or even the basic details of our joint accounts. Henry had managed everything, and I'd been content to live in a bubble of comfortable suburban luxury. "You'll need to get a job," Henry said matter-of-factly during one of our rare conversations. The statement hung in the air like a challenge. I hadn't worked a real job in over 9 years. My last professional experience was a part-time marketing assistant role before we had Matthew. The kids were struggling. Hannah would cry randomly, asking why Daddy was sleeping in a different room. Matthew had started acting out at school, getting into fights, and becoming withdrawn. I knew this was my fault, but admitting that was something I couldn't bring myself to do. My family was surprisingly unsupportive. My sister Isabella was the only one who would even talk to me. "You made your bed," my mother had said coldly when I called her for support. "Now you have to lie in it." Henry was methodical about everything. He'd already secured a top-tier divorce lawyer, started documenting everything, and was preparing for a custody battle that would leave me with minimal time with the children. The reality was crushing. My impulsive affair, those stolen moments in Chicago that had felt so exciting, were now destroying everything I'd ever known. The next few months were a brutal wake-up call. Henry was strategic in everything he did. He started documenting my every move, collecting evidence that would paint me as an unstable mother, text messages, bank statements, social media activity. Nothing was off limits. I tried reaching out to Thomas, hoping for some kind of support, but he ghosted me completely. Those passionate nights in Chicago felt like a distant, almost embarrassing memory. Men like him are experts at temporary excitement, not long-term consequences. The financial reality hit me hardest. I'd spent years shopping online, taking expensive vacations, buying designer clothes, all without any real understanding of our financial situation. Henry had always handled the money, and I'd been content to live in a bubble of suburban comfort. My first job interview was a disaster, a part-time marketing position that would barely cover childcare. The interviewer, a woman in her mid-40s, looked at my resume with barely concealed judgment. 9 years of being just a mom had essentially erased my professional identity. Hannah started having nightmares. She'd wake up crying, asking why mommy and daddy weren't sleeping in the same room. Matthew became increasingly withdrawn, his school grades dropping. I knew I was responsible for breaking our family, but admitting that, I couldn't do it. Henry was calculating. He'd already spoken with a top-tier divorce lawyer, positioning himself as the stable, responsible parent. Every move was carefully planned to minimize my time with the children. The most terrifying part, I was completely dependent on a man I had just completely betrayed. The courtroom felt like a foreign planet, cold, sterile, with Henry sitting across from me looking like he'd been carved from granite. Our entire marriage was being dissected, every mistake, every moment of weakness laid bare for a complete stranger in a black robe to judge. Our mediator, a stern woman in her early 50s named Amelia, kept looking at me with this mixture of disappointment and pity. I could read her thoughts so clearly, another impulsive woman who threw away a perfectly good marriage for a moment of excitement. Henry's lawyer presented evidence like a prosecutor, bank statements showing my impulsive online shopping sprees, screenshots of deleted text messages, hotel receipts from Chicago. Each document felt like another nail in my coffin. Mrs. Amelia, the mediator, said, "Can you explain why you believe you should retain joint custody of the children?" I stammered. The truth was, I didn't have a compelling argument. My affair, my financial irresponsibility, my complete lack of professional stability, it all worked against me. Henry sat there, perfectly composed. His lawyer had built a case that portrayed me as an unstable, unfaithful wife who could potentially be a risk to the children's emotional well-being. And the worst part, a significant portion of what they were saying was true. My sister Isabella was the only one who seemed to understand the complexity of my situation. It wasn't just about the affair, she told me later. It was about years of feeling invisible, of losing yourself in a marriage where you had no identity. But understanding didn't change the consequences. And those consequences were about to become very real. The final court hearing was a blur. Henry stood there, calm and collected, while I felt like I was drowning. The judge's words cut through me like a knife. Limited visitation, supervised visits, and a requirement to prove my stability through counseling and consistent employment. I lost almost everything. The house, our beautiful Tudor-style home, would be sold. Henry would keep primary custody of Matthew and Hannah. I'd get every other weekend, with supervised visits. The life I'd known, completely dismantled by my own hands. Thomas was long gone, no support, no rescue. Just another chapter in my impulsive story. Those stolen moments in Chicago now felt like the most expensive mistake of my life. Henry didn't gloat. He didn't need to. His victory was in the quiet, methodical way he rebuilt our family's life without me. He hired a full-time nanny, enrolled the kids in therapy, and created a stable environment that showed the court, and our children, that he was the responsible parent. My first apartment was a tiny one-bedroom, a far cry from our 6-bedroom home. Every other weekend, I would watch Matthew and Hannah interact with me carefully, measuring their words, their love now cautious and controlled. The lesson wasn't just about an affair. It was about value, the value of trust, of family, of making thoughtful choices. Henry hadn't just won a divorce. He'd won the respect of our children by showing them what true responsibility looks like. I lost everything by chasing a moment of excitement. He gained everything by choosing stability. Thank you for listening until the end. Every story holds a piece of someone's truth, and maybe a piece of your own. If this touched you in any way, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartfelt stories. See you in the next video.